Start by this special meeting agenda. Notice is hereby given of a special meeting of the City Council of the City of San Angelo to be held August 29, 2023 at 8:30 a.m. at the McNeese Convention Center, which is where we're at today, and it is officially called to order. We will open it up for public comment. Issues or concerns not on the agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais, begin by stating their name and address or single-member district number, and limit their remarks to less than 3 minutes. Any public comment today? Seeing none, we will now go into the workshop itinerary. Receive presentation from Specialized Public Finance Incorporated regarding proposed plan of finance for City of San Angelo, Texas, tax notes, Series 2023A, and direct Specialized Public Finance, Inc. to proceed with such plan of finance. And Tina, you are on.
Thank you, Mayor.
Or not.
Yeah. Vince Vial is here from Specialized Public Finance as well if you have any questions on this, but we do have excess capacity in our debt service fund going into fiscal year 2024. So we are looking to issue a short-term note in the amount of $1.875 million. The proposed purpose for this short-term note is currently to offset a grant we may receive for the Chadburn Street Phase B project, although we are going to leave the language open so that if we don't receive that grant, we can use it for another purpose if council directs.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Vince Vial with Specialized Public Finance for the city's financial advisor. As Tina's indicated, what we're seeking this morning is authorization to pursue a tax note issue for the county. This would be a 1-year maturity on this tax note issue. We would do a bank bid on this. In other words, we'd put this out to bid, and they would bid the interest rate on this tax note. We would bring this tax note issue back to City Council on September 19th. At that time, we'll have the bids in hand. We'll present the council with the results of the bids, let you know who the winning bidder was, the interest rate, and we'll be looking for you at that time to consider the ordinance authorizing the issuance of the tax notes. So if we get direction to proceed from the council this morning, that will start the process, and we'll get on with this.
Do I have any questions for us today?
Move approval as presented.
Moved by Tommy, seconded by Harry. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
How far do you have to drive to make this? For your 30 seconds of fame?
I would go a lot further than I need.
Oh, what a guy. What a guy.
Politician, good answer.
He's from where? He's from Cisco, right?
Lives in Weatherford. Lives in Weatherford.
Now, do I have a packet for today?
You can have mine, Mayor.
You don't have them.
No. Michael.
We should have retained all of ours.
This I have.
Oh, you got that?
Well, no, I don't have this.
It's just the slides from that we went over.
I'll get a copy printed.
We didn't do those with me. We just did this with me. I don't have a slide packet for this meeting.
Kimberly's going to get one printed.
So the first slide is the budget preparation, general fund revenues, expenditures, and considerations.
Yes, ma'am. Ready? Okay, we're off. All right, so next slide. Do you want me to do it? Okay, so this is just a reminder of how the property tax is divided amongst the different entities, the school district, the city, and the county. And of course, the Tom Green County Appraisal District sets the valuations, the entities set the tax rate. It's a separation of responsibilities there. Certified estimates this year at $7.6 billion are a 15.1% increase from prior year's revised values. New property added to the roll is $117.7 million. That's important because new properties that are added to the roll are not capped by the 3.5% that was set by the state. The value of 1 penny is $726,000.
And we're confident that this number is a correct number, that we won't wake up and have a $2 million shortage?
We're as confident as we can be.
When do we get,
Again, these are certified estimates that we're working with this year.
when do we
so.
get real numbers?
Tyler said that he expects to have all of the reviews finished by the end of September and to be sending out the actual tax bills by the end of October. So we can come back with an update at that point.
Our budget year
we
starts
expect that
October 1,
this-
right?
Yes, ma'am.
So
But we expect that this estimate is a conservative number, so if anything, we would expect that it would increase rather than decrease. But yes, we can come back and give an update, and if anything changes, we can address it at that point.
So we're sure on this number, the 2004 ordinance that was passed,
This is net of the freeze, for sure.
for sure.
Yes.
Okay. Questions for Tina on this first page of property tax collections? Okay, move on.
So that increase in valuations did require us to decrease the tax rate again this year. You'll recall that last year we decreased it by 3.8 cents. This year we'll be decreasing it by 3.38 cents on top of that.
When we look at these numbers, it's not clear or obvious that when we were at .776, we reserved a part of that to go into a infrastructure street fund.
It's on that second line there.
So that .0060,
Yes, ma'am. And we'll, we have a slide that will show what the street infrastructure fund's budget will be for next year as well, later on.
and how much we've accumulated so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that, but that stays constant regardless of what the new tax rate is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay.
Anything else on this side?
Not at the moment.
Just a reminder of how sales tax works. Of course, 6.25% goes to the state. 1% comes back to the city's general fund. 0.5% goes to the development corporation, and then the remaining 0.5% goes to Tom Green County. Sales tax was up 2.5% in August compared with the same month last year. Year-to-date collections are over the prior year by 9.4%, and we're over our revenue budget by $3 million year-to-date. So that was what we would usually consider surplus sales tax monies that could be used for one-time projects or other things. I will point out, though, that we would probably want to use a net general fund surplus for revenue instead of just the sales tax number to consider any other projects. For example, some of those revenue sources in the general fund are underperforming, and so we'd want to net those out to a more realistic number.
And you'll point those out specifically as we go through this, correct?
Yes, I can point those out
If you would.
at any point that you like.
Okay.
Okay. So this is our sales tax chart showing year-to-date FY23 projections and showing that we are proposing a budget for next year that is lower than current year end projections. We are projecting the current year end at $24.3 million, and so we are proposing a sales tax at 95% of that, or 5% less than current year expected.
And that's based
revenue.
off of current year projected.
Yes, ma'am.
5% of that becomes the new number that we put in the budget.
Yes. So we're projecting $24.3 million, and we are proposing a budget of 23.1.
Okay. Questions for Tina on this information? Okay, move on.
Okay, so moving on, getting into the numbers, general fund revenues. Thankfully, property tax came in strong enough that we were able to cover that $1.9 million deficit and still see a little increase there of $277,000. Sales tax, while we are projecting conservatively at 95% of current year, it still is up a little over $2 million. Alcohol and bingo tax up just a little bit there at $21,000.
But remember, we got to explain that $2 million number. Because if you plan 5% down from actual projected sales tax, you would not show a sales tax increase, and yet this shows a sales tax increase.
Right.
And so you have to explain why that is.
So because sales tax is performing so strongly, and we are seeing a surplus of over our current budget of $3 million. Even though we're projecting down, we still see an increase in sales tax for next year. Franchise tax is up $225,000. That is due to the electric and gas franchises combined are up almost $500,000, but it's offset by a decrease in the TV franchise of $245,000.
What about the fiber optic people?
Franchise fee?
From what we've learned, Teresa and I have looked at it, and it's really the onus is on the fiber companies to remit those monies to the city. I don't think we've started seeing a stream of that quite yet, but we expect that to, once they get the fiber in place and start generating revenues is when we would start to expect to see that, so.
And do we have contacts to ensure that we have a communication line so that we receive those numbers, those
Yes, we do.
dollars?
Yes.
Because
We'll
we
follow up.
certainly are seeing a lot of damage to our streets, our broken water lines, a lot of water
Alleys.
on the streets. So we need to make sure that there's no lack of owning
Holding
the
them accountable.
obligation to
Yes, ma'am.
franchise taxes.
Yes, ma'am. We'll follow up on that regularly, so.
Yes, Larry?
Isn't Frontier done with their installation already?
I don't know.
Well, they've been doing it for a while, so Frontier, well, they've been laying fiber longer than anybody has, right?
I just assumed they were completed already.
Good question. So if they are, where are we on starting to collect franchise taxes? And how do we follow up on that and make sure it happens?
We'll make a note to follow up on that and get some information out to you.
Thank you, Larry.
Does that also include Optimum?
They've always been in there.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes.
That's why she was referring to the fact that TV cable is down because people have options. And so what we used to get as a primary franchise fee was the cable. And now it's reflecting people making other choices. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Charges for service is up over $300,000. That is due to council adopting fee increases earlier in this fiscal year, so those are reflected in next year's budget. And then other sources
It would
include.
seem, excuse me, it would seem that based off of the increase in fees that we approved, that the amount would be larger than 309,000.
Some of it is reflected in other funds such as Fort Concho and the cemetery fund, and we'll see that a couple slides later.
So will there be an opportunity to see, based off of all the different areas where fees were increased, that we would see a total net amount due to increased fees?
It's spread out among different funds, so we don't have, I mean, we could get you a total, but we don't have it anywhere on one page at this point.
I think we need to do that, and it's okay that we don't have it today, but I
follow-up.
think ultimately we need to see the impact of fees as a total on the city budget, even though
Okay.
it's in separate areas.
Sure, we can make a note for that. Other sources includes interest income and indirect costs from other funds that help support the general fund. The bulk of that is $615,000 projected increase for interest, and the remainder is from the indirect cost.
Questions for Tina on any of these line items? Okay.
Okay, moving on to general fund expenditures. Public safety is up almost $1.7 million. Of that amount, $1.3 million is related to the police department. Of that $1.3 million, $400,000 is related to the COPS grant coming fully into the general fund. That is offset down there at the bottom by a $320,000 decrease in transfers out. That grant was accounted for in our grant fund, and now it's fully into the general fund this year. Another $400,000 of that is related to target increase requests that were approved and included in the original budget. $245,000 of that was fleet services, and then there were some other, I think, overtime and some other things that were approved for the police department. The remainder is, let me get to that page. Dispatch, the final phase of the hexagon system came in at $135,000. Fire increase in loyalty pay of $95,000, and then we did approve a cancer screening program in the amount of $25,000 for the fire department.
Well, will we be going through these individually today? these various
We
line
can,
items.
just whatever questions you have, and we can
So-
discuss it at whatever level you'd like.
But there's no additional slides on these.
No, ma'am.
So-
This would be where we would want to discuss any questions.
I think the number one thing that I hear from everybody is the usual conversation about the municipal court. And better understanding that issue, because we keep planning the municipal court at a number, and we've been planning it at a number for over, well, since I've been mayor, 7 years, 6 years. And we never hit that number. We keep putting a number in there that we never hit.
We did decrease the municipal court revenue budget by $275,000 this year.
And it's great from a budget perspective, we've decreased it, but the reality is, if you take a look at the number of citations written and the number of warnings and the number of revenue, we consistently are decreasing the number of citations and the number of warnings. And we all understand that at one point, some new laws were put into place that impacted those citations and those warnings, but at some point, you got to be anniversarying that number. And yet, we're not. We continually go down. Do we?
Do you want to see those numbers, or you just want to talk about them, or?
Would you have a slide for that? So,
This slide shows graphically the trend in citations, warnings, and revenue. And I do actually have actual numbers, here in my notes, so.
so if you take a look at it in a 5-year window, we go from 25,000 citations. Oh, sorry. So in 5 years, we go from 25,000 in citations down to a little over 10,000. And I guess the question is, why is it continually going down? At some point, you should anniversary the impact of new rules and regulations and laws. And I think the biggest concern is the following, and that is fewer tickets, fewer citations. What impact is that in terms of public safety? Because we know running a red light is dangerous, it kills people. Speeding is dangerous, it kills people. And so I think the question would be concerning, what impact does fewer citations and warnings and then net effect actual receipts decreasing, what impact does that have on public safety? Just my comments. Does anybody else have a comment?
I do have a comment, Mayor. I've been working with Chief Carter and assistant chiefs as well, and I know these numbers have been going down, and we've been talking about it every year, Mayor. And so when we do meet, we do address these numbers. I know that recently they've had a plan to really address this, and we're not seeing the numbers yet, but this past month those numbers have been going up and will continue going up. And the important thing that I keep delivering as far as the message to the chief is, and he understands this, that when these revenues go down, there's such a need in the police department that needs to be taken care of. And from police stations to you name it, you'll see some of them pop up here in just a little bit. But when these revenues do go down, it's concerning because we want to make sure that if we set up a budget, any marginal revenue that goes above that amount that I've actually addressed is that we'd be more than willing to dedicate that toward the police department and to assist them on all the needs that they have. So when you see the numbers going down like that, it is concerning. I definitely agree with that, Mayor. But I know that at this point, and I've been working very diligently with the chiefs, started meeting also with the association. I will be monitoring these numbers to make sure that they start continuing going up. It's not just going to be this past month, but continuing after that. But it has been problematic, and we have talked about it over the years. I know that the chief, and of course, they've talked about the impact of COVID. Well, we're past COVID now, and it's time to start seeing these numbers start going up again. And it goes back to safety. It's not a matter of we're setting a quota. We cannot set a quota. That's illegal. But we do want to make sure that our streets are safe, and we want to make sure that that individuals that are breaking the law are pulled over and either receive a citation or a warning. But again, this is something that I'll continue working very closely with them. Again, there's a plan that they did have that they've implemented, and this past month, and you'll see in the future months, these numbers start going up.
Well, because we all understand that we can't do quotas, but my assumption is the following, that we couldn't do quotas in 18 either, fiscal year 18,
That's
right?
correct.
So we've never been able to set quotas.
That is correct.
So the 5-year trend is reflective of never setting quotas, new laws which have impacted issues, and yet we're seeing $1.7 million increase in the public safety dollars, and we are continually seeing a decrease in number of citations and warnings and revenues, so the general fund keeps picking up those dollars
Right.
and having to cover those dollars.
Correct.
And that is an issue.
Yes, ma'am.
Any further comment from council? Okay, move on.
Public Works, there's an increase there of $177,000. Some of that is due to a reorg in the engineering division, and then there's also an increase for converting a lower-level position to a CLD coordinator position.
Explain the
sorry.
CDL.
CDL.
CDL. I'm dyslexic today.
Is that a truck driver's license, the CDL?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
I would ask Shane, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah, we're having to train. One of the biggest problems that we've had is we've lost staff, and some of those CDL drivers that we had on staff went somewhere else, other organizations that were paying more money. And so on our end, we decided that what we need to do is train from within. We have a loyal staff that's been with us for a while, and we'd like to get those individuals certified in CDL. Those individuals that have been with us that have benefits with the city, they've had them for years. And we feel that by training these individuals, we can have them stick around with the city and provide that CDL service that we actually need, the truck driving service, tractor service, all the things that they do for us. So again, this is an effort on our end to train from within and keep staff that we currently have that have been loyal to the city.
Well, in the past, I'm assuming they were trained by somebody else?
They were,
But
I mean-
we paid for that training, correct?
That is correct. So
And when we paid for that training, did we have a commitment for a minimum amount of years or months, et cetera, that they would have to give us in order to us paying for that CDL? So we train them, and then they can leave in 2 days?
we didn't, but we have Veronica up here that's
Yes, hi.
Talk to that.
Veronica Sanchez, Assistant HR Director. There was actually a legislative change in the last probably year that requires a different certification, a different trainer for the CDL certification. Currently, I believe there is 1 or 2 trainers locally, and they charge about $5,000 per person to train. It takes somewhere around 3 months, so it would be more efficient if we had our own trainer.
The question as far as legally committing individuals once they go through the actual training, Tracy, you want to talk a little bit about that?
We do have some programs at the city, I think fire perhaps. When they go through training, they are committing to staying with us for a certain period of time, or they're going to pay that back. I know there's been discussions about other departments, but we have not done that yet.
And why haven't we?
Our pay for CDL drivers is well below what a private company can pay, and so even if we had some sort of agreement with them, I imagine that they would still leave. The best thing that we can do is do in-house training for that, and obviously through our benefit package, try to retain them, and then obviously. One of the biggest benefits as a CDL driver is that you can stay here. You don't have to go out of town. You don't have to
Not on the road
stay
all the
away.
time.
Yes, correct.
I have a question.
Yes,
Another-
Lucy.
I'd like to add one other thing. I know that not necessarily in CDL drivers, but then in other areas, we are seeing employers who will buy out those provisions to hire people away from us as well. So even if we had that program in place, it doesn't mean we're going to keep people any longer.
That was going to be my question, was about, is there anywhere where we could put the reimbursement if they were to leave, that they would pay us back for the training they received?
It is possible. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Larry?
I believe Mr. Valenzuela's addressed in the past that we're investing the CDL certification in people who are long-term employees of the city, so they're less apt to bolt because they have strong reasons to stay here rather than to. So I would stick with that as training those drivers who have, I don't know, 6, 7 years already with the city rather than somebody who's just off the street.
Yes, Tom?
It's a very complicated issue, and a CDL driver is somebody that's highly sought after now. But I think in discussions that we've all had in the past period of 6 months when it comes to retaining a CDL, there's usually a window if they're here just for the training and then they exit shortly after that training. We're looking at that window. I mean, to lessen the cost of the burden of everybody. If there's a way to maybe secure that, that's fine. We got to stay with what's legal. And, you know, I made a comment yesterday, like, if somebody doesn't want to be here, we understand that, and you're probably better off without them here. But if there was a window of if they leave within 3, 6, 9, or 12 months of receiving training that we spent, $5,000 on?
Well, hopefully less with us doing it in-house, but
Right.
yes.
So, you know, I'm with the mayor on it'd be great to be able to retain some of those funds. It's something that's hard to look at, but it's just something that we want to make sure that we're doing the best thing for the citizens, and we don't want to be the training and the launching pad for 8 other companies in town.
Sure. We understand that. And Brian made a good point. We did approve, or council did approve the CDL ad pay last year, and so that's been implemented as well for retention.
Other questions? Yes, Harry?
I'll just make a comment. The city is no different than any other business in the community and the surrounding area when it comes to CDLs. But if we can find a way that will help retain them, put some onus on them before they go through the training in some way to retain them, then I think that we ought to take that particular opportunity. But I can tell you for a fact, anybody that has drivers with a CDL, they jump ship all the time.
You know, in a meeting with Roger Albert at one point he said he wishes that we would stop recruiting trucking companies, because every time we recruit a trucking company, they recruit from Reese Albert, they're truckers. So it works both from the private to the economic development. When you have a field of need, and CDLs are of need. So, yes, go ahead, Brian.
And I was going to say, for retention for a certain group of people, the city is very attractive. It was mentioned before, you don't have to go out of town. Most of our jobs are Monday through Friday. If you're a family person or if you just like a work-life balance, there are things that we offer here at the city that you don't get at other places. Now, if you're just going for the money, there's no way we're going to be able to compete with that.
But quality of life changes.
We see the news from UPS like last night with that new contract that they just signed. I mean, there's no way we can compete with people who are willing to go nonstop in those kind of situations. But for those who value work-life balance and value the kind of public service attitude, I think we are attractive to a certain group of folks.
Do you know long-haul truck drivers today are limited to X amount of hours a day, so they can't work around the clock. The law does not allow that.
Right. I think that's where UPS is a little bit different because it's, there's seasonality.
Not 18-wheelers.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so Larry, please.
I'm curious about what we're doing for incentive for the trainers. Because if I was a trainer and it's $5,000 a pop to train a person, is there any movement among them to go out and search for another job that pays more?
Well, so those trainers are not getting that money directly because they're doing it, I think.
They're an employee.
The biggest one we have is through Howard College. So that's the cost through Howard College to do it. So that person that trains at Howard College is also on salary, just like we're trying to create this position. So I think we'll be competitive there.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions or comments anyone would like to make on this item? Okay, so where are we?
We're on, we are finishing up Public Works and moving on to Public Services. The bulk of the increase there is in the Parks Department for addition of the Chadbourne Street Maintenance Program and the Chadbourne Streetscape. And then there was a decrease that offset that for the Nature Center. So it's down a little bit at $916 decrease.
Okay. Next, any questions on that line? Okay.
Okay, so Development Services had a new planning tech added. You'll remember that you approved conversion of one position to two positions, and there was a slight cost associated with that. And then they're also up from loyalty pay. They had an employee with tenure transferred into their department, so there was a little bit of an increase for that as well. Neighborhood and Family Services is up due to code salaries and animal services salaries. Health is up just slightly.
No, let's go back for a minute, because and this might not be the appropriate time to talk about it, but animal services, we keep getting lots of questions and comments and issues on animal services. So are we going to dig in further into detail in this category, or is this it?
We can dig in as deep as you'd like. I think Morgan is here if you have other questions or concerns.
Yeah, I think the council has some questions and some concerns, so that would be good.
Stepped out, didn't she?
Morgan just stepped out, but they're going to go grab her.
There's nothing worse than going to the restroom and then finding out you need
Here,
to
you gotta
leave.
come back.
How the panic.
We planned it that way.
How it works.
Center of focus now.
You want me to move on to the couple more and when she gets back, or do you just want to wait a few minutes?
Wait, I doubt that'll be that long.
Tina, what all is in development services, all the categories?
Hold on, I have a list here.
Maybe the top five.
There are 4 categories under their budget are administration, planning, GIS, and permits and inspections.
So how's the head count? Brenda, if you don't mind. How's the head count in planning and permits? John, I mean, because the number one thing I heard when I came on at 17 was the lack of head count to get things done, and
It's a turnover issue.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I have the exact numbers, but we have about 25 employees total. 4 of those are in GIS, 5 in planning, about 14, 15 in permits, and then at the admin and development services, the frontline folks, I think we have 4 in that. So,
how many holes do you have in there?
right now,
What's your head count, or what's supposed to be your head count, and what do you have?
I think right now, unless I'm missing something, I think we only have 1 vacancy at the moment. There's been some, we've recently filled a couple, so.
Well, the other issue, Tom, and is that we have gone to a system where more things are supposed to be submitted online, and less about people coming in with the plans in hand and sitting there and going over it. The question mark is, has that created any efficiencies that are notable, or is it just a different process, but it hasn't changed efficiencies or time that is required?
The way I would answer that, it hasn't created efficiencies in terms of now we need fewer people. It's just changed the role. We have people now who process the online. We have a software person that does some of the online application processing versus, a few years ago, it would have been somebody at the counter helping someone. It has, over the last 8 or 10 years, total, but especially in the last 3 or 4, since we've rolled out the online applications, that has generally reduced our timeframes for reviews. That's a little higher right now. They reduced, and then over the last year, it's increased a little bit. We're still processing things faster than we did, say, 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it's a little slower than it was, say, 2 years ago. But a large part of that is attributable to the online applications and the online reviews.
Well, I was in there last week, in and out, no gripes, complaints, everything was quick and efficient, and I left there going, I don't know what it was then from a personal experience, but I know you walked in there, you got it, they filled out the form, and you were in and out, and I'm just hoping the steps that we did, like Brenda says, make you more efficient and expedite it some. I don't know if we ever
Your
succeed.
Councilman Tom Thompson might have speeded
No
it up
idea.
a bit.
No, didn't know me from a large load of hay, so it was all good. Thank you, John.
Any other questions for John? Okay.
I think Morgan is here now.
Yeah. I think we've all received this email chain of the Jackson Street scenario, and it's very concerning. And so I think council has said to me, we need to talk about that because that scenario was not good. And we know that there's a problem with people relinquishing their animals at a greater level than they've ever done before. All cities have found that their animal shelters are at capacity. And then people say, well, the no-kill thing isn't working. So the question mark, is it or is it not? And how do we ensure that the episode that happened this past week doesn't happen again?
So I think there are a number of policies and items included in traditional no-kill language that don't always make sense in every community, right? And so I think what's really important about our staff and our team is we stay up to date on the latest, data-proven towns like us, what are they doing to offer life first, right? It's not intended to say we're going to shut down until we make sure we hit 90%. It's our plan it's our intention to make policies that serve this community well, that serve San Angeloans well. We are operating with limited resources, like all city departments, and I recognize that everyone's asking for additional budget, additional people, but that is we're very limited. We have 4 animal services officers to cover our community. We're a growing community of 100,000 citizens and their pets, and we cover almost 60 square miles of area to patrol and respond to calls for service. And we respond 365 days a year. We go to all bite cases, cruelty cases, police assist, fire assist. We go to those round the clock. If it's a Sunday afternoon, if it's a Monday at 2 o'clock in the morning, those are calls that we're at with 4 animal services officers. So I think what contributed to the case at North Jackson was limited staff, limited availability in that response. We do, of course, have the animals in custody now. I have no expectation that they're going back to that household in that area. It's largely driven by the resources we have available for the response time. Calls for service for animal-related items are up 50% year over year. It's an issue that gets a lot of attention and gets a lot of calls to our area, to our division, that we don't always have the resources to cover. So the very first time we had a report of a bite, we were, of course, there within minutes. We do have reports there of the dogs at large a number of times over the summer, and we did respond each and every time. But when we're at other bite calls, there might be a delay in that response. And I'm pulling that information now to have really good data to report back to y'all. But so far, we spent all of Sunday, all of Monday, a good bit of Friday at this location addressing these issues, and of course do have the animals in custody.
Questions? Karen?
Good morning. I'm curious whether or not the animal shelter has contracts with Best Friends, American Pets Alive, or the Haas model, which is Human Animal Support Services. And I'm curious because a number of these organizations are being pointed to as culprits in other communities that have been sued for their policies. I can name them if it matters. El Paso is one. There's been an issue in Abilene, New York, but these are nationwide organizations.
The city doesn't have contracts with any of those organizations. As we set policy to offer life first, and then the math is the math, right? It's not that we're trying to hit this magic number of 90%. We are looking at a number of peer cities, other organizations, what they're pursuing, but there's no contracts with any animal welfare groups, the ones you've listed or others.
What about PAWS, your contracted partner? Do they have contracts with any of these organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, but I really couldn't speak to their legal status.
Yes. I think we would like to know the answer to that because there have been social media posts that indicate that they've received grant monies or donations from some of these organizations, and it's worth our scrutiny. We don't have enough information at this point to address it further, but I think it's worth knowing.
Meaning that PAWS received grant monies, and you're
Yes.
asking how those grant monies were utilized?
Yes. Mm-hmm. For example, here's a post made by Concho Valley Paws, and it says, "A big thank you to our friends at Best Friends Animal Society for a generous financial gift of so many thousands, a certain number of thousands of dollars." So Paws is not really under discussion here, but we do have a contractual agreement with them, so hence my question.
Isn't PAWS a nonprofit?
It is,
All right.
and they are entitled to collect money. The concern is that some of these organizations are very much under fire across the nation.
And they're under fire
Their
because?
programs and policies that have basically failed. Multi-million-dollar lawsuits in some of these communities.
Well, yes, go ahead, Tommy.
Question and then a comment for a question for Morgan, and then I will have a follow-up comment. Morgan, didn't we, I don't know, a year, 18 months, whatever, approved one time, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000 for additional
Yes, we did.
staff?
We did a directed patrol. City Council funded some overtime for after-hours weekend patrol of certain pockets of town where there were reports of packs of dogs at large. We fully expended those funds and provided weekly updates to y'all of our activity there.
The problem with it, Tommy, was that, they followed up and sent us reports on specific areas that they went because they were reported, and consistently the report came back, they found nothing.
Well, and that was the report, there was more to it than that, but that was part of when they made several calls to the North Jackson situation, there was no activity on some of those calls that they made. So I'm not discounting anything that happened there, but my question is that something, Morgan, that was helpful enough when we did that, that we should do that again. Is that something that would be helpful for you? Would it be something that would need to be, let's say, a permanent situation, or could you then come to us, if it wasn't permanent, come to us and say, we're seeing certain things happen that we may need some of this assistance with additional overtime. So maybe that's something we could consider too, if in fact it was, I'll say, successful enough in your opinion when we did it, that it would be helpful again.
Sure. There were a number of weeks that we reported back under that prior program of no activity or no activity at certain neighborhoods, but we did have a number of chronic areas that, you know, the dogs are at large from this specific household each Saturday morning. Well, of course, we're not catching that during the week, and so we built important relationships and compliance with those households. So it's something we could for sure consider.
You know, it goes back to the same issue is the animal shelter, and the issue with the aggressive dogs goes back to people. People own these dogs. People don't control these dogs. As long as ownership of pets is not taken as a responsibility by the public, we can't fund enough these issues, because that money that we gave, I promise you 90% of the reports came back said they didn't find these dogs. And that is, you know, whether the dogs sense it, I don't know. But here's what I do know is it's about people taking responsibility. We can't increase the shelter large enough. We can't increase the staff large enough. We can't do a lot of these things if the public doesn't understand their responsibility, particularly when it comes to aggressive dogs or feeding cats. Yes, Lucy.
Okay, Morgan, on these ordinances, I think that was one of the concerns that a lot of constituents have, that they're not enforced. And we're talking about like the number of dogs that a person may have. We're talking about the spayed and neutered ordinance. There's a lot of ordinances that are not being followed through. Do you by any chance have any kind of reports that have the percentages of the citations that have been issued and that you have followed through, you know, after a citation is given? Do these people do what is supposed to, or like, how do we track these citations is what I'm asking.
I can pull some reports. I wouldn't be able to speak to that information today. I don't have it with me today. And once they enter the court system, for example, there's a property, we issued 8 citations for tethered dog, more than 2 hours. And it's going through the lengthy process of a jury trial through municipal court. So while it's going through that process and they're having their due time through the court system, we have to halt all enforcement until the court hears that first case. So I can get y'all some information on that, though, and report back.
Well, I think that there had been we did something that gave a little more power to the municipal court, if that's the right word, for these citations and making people show up or they lose their animals. What was that? Because I know we tried to address some of the issues with municipal court and animals citations.
I'm not familiar.
You just did this last year. We got a memo on it.
I believe it was the speeding up the process through municipal court, eliminating some obstacles so we could quickly get to the court, get them in, and get them processed. I believe that's what it was.
I think it also dealt, if I remember correctly, with those people who the animal was released into the owner's hands and had X amount of days to spayed or neutered. And if they didn't within that time frame, then it went quickly to the courts. Is that correct?
That's the backlog that I'm reporting back to y'all quarterly of the volume of unaltered pets returned to owner that we're filing through the court. So it's instead of writing a citation in front of the person or giving them a warning in 10 days, hey, you've got to comply with this, we can then go back and file in absentia, and they get a citation essentially in the mail. So it's filing a complaint. That's a new process we did implement last year, but it wasn't a change on the municipal court side, and it wasn't a more speedy court process. It was just an additional allowance that we can cite through the mail in a filed complaint instead of a ticket right in front of the person.
When we receive the information that the animal shelter is at capacity, and we call ourselves a no-kill facility, have we, I hate to ask for this information, but have we had to euthanize a number of dogs and cats with the lack of, overcapacity issues?
Well, first, I don't call us a no-kill facility. We have no such assurances. We take it day by day, case by case. It's our intention to offer reasonable resources with the amount that we have available to us. And so as far as achieving a no-kill status, that's not even language we really use. We try to implement and apply programming that offers life first to animals while still providing for the public safety. So we've not yet had to euthanize for space. When we do publish a list of a euthanasia list, these dogs shall be euthanized by this date, if not fostered, adopted, rescue transferred. To date, each of those animals has been saved, but we, of course, euthanize regularly for aggression, reactivity, illness or injury beyond reasonable treatment. That hasn't stopped and will continue.
Well, I know this, the public constantly, and I get these emails, believe we're a no-kill facility. And they say that, they use that terminology. So, and they think that's part of the problem. So it's important that you explain that we are not a no-kill facility, but what we are is what you just explained, and you might explain that again.
Yes, it's, life saving is a community ethic, and we're the shelter that this community wants us to be. And so to the extent that San Angeloans are adopting, fostering, coming and claiming and reclaiming their pets from the shelter, then those are live releases that we'll document as such. But to the extent that we do have to euthanize, as I mentioned, the math is what the math is. We don't make decisions on euthanasia like, well, I'm not going to euthanize this pet today because it's the end of the year and I'm at 89.9%. So I want to make sure I hit 90% for the year. Each case.
But we used to talk about those numbers.
Well, it was a goal.
Yeah.
But the more important goal is that each animal and each family is getting the appropriate services, whether that's enforcement or resources or whatever in between. That families are being served well, the community's being served well, and as a result, animals get a chance, a reasonable chance at life first.
Questions? Larry?
Yes, ma'am. I wonder if you could talk to your staffing if you have problems. It sounds like there's problems with issuing citations. Can you talk to that, please? Your manning?
Sure. And I'm sorry, to clarify, issues with issuing citations?
Well, you're not fully staffed at this moment. You explained to me before the meeting that you're going to be at 100%, but is that still adequate? I don't know how far that staffing goes back, but the city's grown considerably, and I'm curious if we've kept up with the needs.
Sure. So we are expected to be fully staffed as of September 1st. We have some new staff, two new team members onboarding on that day. But even at fully staffed, I have new hires that aren't certified yet. And as you mentioned, we are serving a community of 100,000 people. We did have an increase to our staffing last year with the addition of an office assistant to be able to better track data. But beyond that, there's the amount of care for the amount of staff available for direct animal care and the number of staff available to respond to calls for service and patrol the community have been unchanged for perhaps 8 or more years.
Calls,
some of them longer than that. The animal services
increased?
officers.
Is that what you just said? I
No,
might have heard you wrong.
The number of staff available to respond to calls for service have remained flat for better than 8 years.
We added one last year.
No, we added an office assistant to be in-house for administrative work. The number of folks in the field patrolling, responding to calls for service is unchanged at 4 animal services officers for at least 8 years.
You can give us statistics then that said over the past 5 years, for example, the number of calls, service calls asked for is
Up
what?
50%.
Yeah, so I think that's what Larry's kind of asking for maybe is, what's our history here? Okay, so in year 1, we had this many calls for service, year 2, this many calls, et cetera. And then the question mark too, because it was brought up before, is that nationwide there seems to be, after COVID, many cities finding that people have relinquished their pets and that there's an over-pet population now. And with that said, have those individuals who before would accept some of our animals and we would have a person drive them to that city, et cetera. And I know last year, recently, you said that those services have stopped because all cities are feeling the pain of that. Is that changed?
As the nation's embraced offering life first and pursuing opportunities for animals to be saved in a live release, those receiving agencies have dried up. We were aces at it for a number of years. We saw any hoops that those receiving agencies asked to jump through. Our staff and our team at PAWS did so. And so we did see that decline in 2020 and now down to, I believe we have 1 receiving partner that's consistently pulling from our facility, whereas it used to be 2 and 3 a month with dozens of animals leaving out of our facility. So we knew that the transports were higher than the norm, higher than the industry standard, and it left us vulnerable too. When these receiving agencies dry up, what are you going to do? And we knew that that was coming.
Yes. Further question? Yes, Harry first and then Tom. Harry, you're first.
Appears like I'm seeing more pets on the street. Generally not aggressive, but they're running loose, probably gotten out of somebody's yard, wherever the case may be. Shelter's at capacity. We're adopting pets out on a regular basis, sometimes multiple weekends. Are we at capacity in San Angelo for the number of people that want to adopt? And we're still limiting ourselves as to no kill unless it's necessary. We're not being able to transport animals outside of San Angelo. Is it time to think differently about what we're doing and how we're doing it?
Sure, and we're absolutely rethinking, what are our opportunities, what tough decisions have to be made. Adoptions are down locally, return to owner as a percentage are up year over year. So it's one of many, for sure, we can absolutely and do reconsider that regularly.
Bob?
I was going to say, maybe it's time to relook at our processes again. We do that at certain periods of time, and maybe it's another one. When we first took over the animal services in my department, we had a high kill. We reduced that to 50%. That was still too many animals being killed, so we made some changes. We try things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Maybe it's time to kind of look at our processes now and our policies, and maybe we can alter a little bit, change a little bit, and see if we can come up with some kind of hybrid solution to deal with some of those problems. Now, animals loose, that may be anecdotal. I'm not sure if we have hard data on whether or not there's actual packs of animals running around loose. There
No census count on that?
Say what?
No census count on that?
So, but the point is, I think there's always time to take a look and open up a dialogue, and let's take a look at it to see if there's things we can change, and we're always doing that. We are a change agent. We try to do things differently. If they don't work, we change. So maybe it's time to do it again.
Tom?
Morgan, I think at one point in time, how many of the pets you see that you bring into there that you pick off the street are probably repeat offenders, if I'm using the right word?
For this year, our repeat offenders are quite decreased. There are some usual suspects that I haven't seen in a good while because we did that case management. We invested in that household, got them matched with spay-neuter, low-cost vouchers, things like that. So this year, and I'm sorry, I couldn't tell you the exact number, but this year, 2023, our repeat offenders are largely decreased from prior years.
Well, I think
Which is good to hear.
Well, it's good to hear, but number one, it's an animal. They're hard to control. They're never at the same spot. I mean, you can ask the police, you can ask Frank, anybody, if, hey, there's a problem going over here with a group of people. By the time you get there, that crowd's kind of gone. They migrate. We get that. I thank you for coming up here and giving a report, which you were unprepared or, you didn't have to give, but it's something we need to look at further down the line and try to help you and assist it. But it's still one of the biggest expenses we have, and the revenue that you get to provide for that, it limits your capability, what you can do. And we understand that. We want to thank y'all for doing a nice job, but it'd sure be great to look at some policies to where we could reduce the repeat offenders and try to maybe hold some owners accountable for what they have.
I think
what gets out.
particularly right now, Tom, and the rest of council, is with this episode on Jackson Street, having one child attacked. I mean, we always see on the news about an animal that was an aggressive dog bit a family or built a child or attacked a child. We don't want to be a community where there's a story about that happening. So when we all got this email over the weekend and about the Jackson Street episode, certainly red flags have gone up for all of us. And even though it was one instance, one child being attacked is too many. And so we're concerned. The public is concerned. And yes, I'm sorry that you weren't expected to come forward, but this recent episode has put a lot of red flags out there, and I'm getting lots of emails and text messages from people about, what are you doing? Why aren't we managing this? Why does this happen? So we as council have to have some answers and some information to share with the public. And so today was necessary to ask those questions in a public format so that people have the information you've provided and the questions have been asked by council that are necessary.
Mayor, if I may as well, I can tell you right now, as far as conscientious, I think Morgan, and thank you, Tom, for saying that. Morgan's a very conscientious individual. She does really good work. I know the challenges are there, and with her coming in, my office used to receive calls every week, emails every week, and those have pretty much gone away. These are the occasional situations that we face, like this weekend, where you have a pack of animals and they're responding and trying to do the job that they can, the best they can. But I just didn't want to move on until I had an opportunity to say that Morgan's doing a great job, and I do appreciate her with the resources that she has or the lack thereof. I know in the past couple of years we've put more resources toward the animal shelter to make sure that it runs better, that it has what it needs. From the ventilation system to just pretty much everything that needed a lot of work for the past several years. So, Council, thank you for doing that. But again, I just wanted to make sure that as we move on, I know that she's doing the best work. Morgan's doing the best work she can at this point with the resources she has, and we do appreciate you for that, Morgan. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yes, and I think all of us have probably received fewer emails than when we did in 2017 when we really had a crisis on our hands. Some of you as new council members don't know that time period, but there was a time period when it was really, really, really bad. So it is not to diminish your work and your effort and your review of the issues. So don't take this conversation as a criticism, but as an opportunity to better explain to the public what you're doing, why you're doing it, what you're looking at, etc. And unfortunately, one instance where a child's safety was at risk brings up lots of questions, and I think you've addressed those. I'm sure we'll hear from the public again today on our questions and answers, et cetera. We're here to help support, but your work and effort is dynamically different than it was in 2017 and the issues that existed out there. So we've made progress, but as they always say, that's yesterday. Now what are you doing tomorrow? And so that's really what we're saying today is a lot of progress, but what are we doing tomorrow to continue to improve the situation? And that's really the question. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for coming forward unprepared. Did you want to add one more thing? Because it sounded like you did.
Thank you so much. Although we've changed a number of policies and done so much research, our main goal over the last 6 years has been to professionalize the department, that my team members are trained and educated so that they have the necessary information and discernment so that there are less complaints coming to you, that they have the latest information, that they are sharp individuals and they invest heavily in their job and they hear this feedback from y'all. And so I appreciate the continued investment. I appreciate the direction and support, and I have a number of deliverables that I'll certainly get back to y'all.
You always do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see, we were now moving into health. Oh, any other questions on neighborhood and family services? None. So we move into health.
So health is up just slightly. That's due to just reallocation of salaries as the grants that they receive fluctuate. Government is down $78,000. That's due to the conversion of a position out of that grouping and into the administration line. And then administration is up $434,000. $140,000 plus of that is due to the increase in the contract with the appraisal district. The remainder is due to.
Is that negotiable?
That is not negotiable.
We did meet.
Just asking.
We did meet with Tyler, Mayor, and that's a good point.
Bit of irony there.
One thing that I did ask of him is that he needed to reduce that amount of the $140,000. He did go back and review his budget, and I believe he had reduced it by a certain number, by $65,000. But Tina, there was a requirement from the state that caused him to actually raise the amount. He had lowered $65,000. Then he had to actually raise that amount back up and said, actually, it's going to be a little bit more than what I was requesting.
I understand that they have a new requirement to have an election for 3 additional board members. And so according to Tyler, that's going to cost an additional $75,000 into his budget to run that election.
So the public will vote on those 3 additional people?
That's what I understand, yes, ma'am.
So do people campaign for these jobs?
I guess.
I mean, or what happens? Because it's an election, which means somebody's got to put their name out there to be voted on.
That the state set that law, so.
All right, so with that, the balance of that board happens to be people we vote on
Up to a point,
as a
yes.
council for X amount of positions. So the 3 elected will go into effect when? When's that election? When do they go into effect?
I did not get that information from Tyler, but I can follow up and find that out for you.
And then the question would be, those 3 elected officials, what authority do they have over the ones that are appointed? Are they superior to the appointed ones?
I'll get some time with Tyler. I'm sure he understands how it works, and we can get a memo or something out to you to help you understand how it
Because
works.
by the nature that some are elected by the public, some are appointed by us, one would assume some of the elected would have priority over the others. Tom, you're smiling, so you're thinking something that you need to be vocal about.
Tommy's
Tommy's
going to
Maybe
be
not.
campaigning. Tommy's going to be campaigning.
They were questioning the, I would say, accuracy and authenticity of the numbers that were given to discuss, and we're just going to leave that alone at this point.
Meaning the 140,000, or what do you mean?
We're talking about the numbers, the
1.9.
source we're getting
Yes.
for the numbers.
Yes.
So we're good.
Okay. All right, so 140,000 out of the 434, what's the balance?
100,000 of that is related to the position for the finance enterprise software that you all approved last year. Again, that's offset by the decrease in the government line. And then the balance is contractually obligated increases to software type contracts throughout all the departments.
Questions for Tom? You're smiling again, so something's going on down there.
No,
I don't know what.
He's
but-
going to strike me, I think, Mayor.
Okay, well, then you talk, Tommy, so.
No, I'm not.
Oh,
We're
no
good.
one's
We're
talking.
good.
I'm not going to bother him.
We're good with this slide.
Okay. Then have asterisk transfers.
Okay, so transfers out, I have a breakdown right here on this next slide. The intergovernmental line, again, is due to the COPS grant, that $320,000 no longer being transferred out and fully in the general fund. About $150,000 decrease in support to Fairmount Cemetery and Fort Concho. Again, that's related to the fees that you adopted earlier this year, which lessens the impact on the general fund and requires less support to those funds.
One of the questions that, or one of the things that we always talk a lot about is the percentage public safety represents to the general fund. The last time I think we looked at that number, it was 54% of the total sales tax and property tax dollars. Is that right, Daniel?
Sounds correct. I know that public safety is more than 50% of the
I think it was always
total expenditure,
54. So can you give us a history on that?
Yes, ma'am. Kimberly's created a quick chart on that while we've been chatting. And it looks like it stays fairly around the same percent over the last 10 years with the general, or other than public safety remaining between 42 to 44% every year. And then, police and fire, again, just a steady trend line increasing as we give raises or
Well, I
things
think
like that.
I think the number we always referred to as police and fire as a percentage to the general fund. You want to
Mayor,
take
while
a break?
While she's looking for that, let me ask a question.
Sure.
I want a little more clarification on the Fort Concho situation since we're taking $100,000 out of that budget. I'm a little biased because I was on that board before I was a councilman, but I need to have a clearer understanding what that is.
And why it is.
So because their fees increased, they're able to better support themselves as a fund and require less support from the general fund. So we are supplementing them less.
Mr. Bluehart?
I think Bob can also speak to the state office building and that debt falling off as well. Yeah, their total budget is not going down, to clarify. We are just sending less from the general fund. So their revenues increased in the fund, so that offset some of their expenditures.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. There are many ways to address this, so if I may, let me give you a brief overview and then we can take questions. $97,000 is a lot of money. And I will admit it's more than what I saw in my draft budget of several months ago, so I'm a little surprised. The fee increases that Council approved recently are going to take at least a full fiscal year to have an effect. The fee increases for the rentals of the buildings, which is a good income source for us. We already are at 50% capacity for fiscal '24. So we're only going to get a piece of that. So fiscal '25 would be the first year that those fees would come in full. The Christmas event, we were authorized to increase $2 across the board for admissions and for the vendors. But again, we're tied to previous information that's out there. We have thousands of rack cards that still have the old rates, and so we're going to have to defer that until 2024. Now, the bottom line is the bottom line. We can make the budget work if we're allowed to do a little value engineering and if we're allowed to look at the state fund, which is one of our revenue sources, and I can work with the budget office and with finance, but I will admit this is a larger hit than I was anticipating. No fault, no criticism, but I just need some time to work that out.
What were you anticipating the impact would be, not the 97,000, but what?
65,545.
And that number was before we included the fee increases.
And that number was, of course, predicated on the full implementation of that for fiscal '24, which I've explained that is not going to occur. So if, and again, no criticism here, there's a lot of back and forth on this. The fort's budget is a complicated array of earned income, donations, rental, and a lot of variables. But if I'm allowed to work with the budget office and the finance office and with the state fund, we can close the gap on this and relatively make it work. But I just want council to know that those fee increases are not an automatic October 1 fiscal nirvana. It just doesn't work that way.
Correct.
It's actually good in that in fiscal '24, we're already 50% booked.
Congratulations. Good.
That's good, but it doesn't work that when you raise fees, it automatically just clicks in on that October 1. So I should be around for fiscal '24, I should be around for fiscal '25, so hopefully we can make that work.
Then, Harry, would you like to recommend that we add back into his budget 40,000?
That's my recommendation. It is in my district also, so, I want to do everything we can do to make sure that we're successful at Fort Concho. It's one of the biggest assets in the city, best restored fort west of the Mississippi, and I just want to continue to invest in that organization. So that is my recommendation.
You have a comment.
I understand the recommendation, but I think that what Bob talked about, working with the finance department, is a good solution. Instead of going 40,000 right now, we know that there will be an impact with a fee increase. It won't be October 1st, but it will be throughout the whole year, right?
And Daniel, we can work with Bob to probably just supplement that with the state office building funds that are freeing up.
Right.
So we can definitely work with him to fix that.
So we don't need to change it. They're going to figure out a way to solve it, Harry. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Unless there's other questions for Bob. Council, any further questions or comments? It is an important part of our history, and it's part of our authentic financial, which I'm talking a lot about authentic experiences, and that is one.
We appreciate your support, and I'm by nature rather cheap, so I will not overspend the household budget.
So if all of you have an upcoming event, book a facility, okay? He needs
And two of
your
you are
support.
members, so the others, saddle up.
Well, this is all we have for the numbers, so if you did want to take a quick break, this might be a good time to do it before we get into
Well, you were going to give us the
proposed changes.
percentage on
okay.
fire and police.
She has it manually. I can just read them off if you want. We don't have a slide for it. Is that? Or we can break and Brian can add it to the slides.
Whichever is most efficient.
Probably that. That way he can get it loaded up.
Let's take a break. Let's take a 12-minute break. Maybe we will call, Lucy, are you ready to call this back to order?
Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry.
Tell her no.
You're not through with the conversation with Karen?
I'm ready.
You're ready.
We'll pass notes like if
She's
we're
busy funding the arts over here.
Okay. So it's 10:18. We're going to move forward and continue with this conversation. So what page are, okay, go ahead.
Mayor, this is just that, showing that trend line of increases to the budget over the past 10 years. The blue line is PD, the red line is the fire department, and the green line is everything else. The spike in 2015, I believe, is due to implementing the SEAL coat program is the only thing I can think of in that year, but other than that, it remains pretty steady over time. I know what bar chart you are referring to, and so we can get that out to y'all in a packet later
Well, I
this
think
week.
the important statement is that with the end, because people ask about the dollar increases in some of these categories, but the important part is that our revenue has grown at the same level or more, or same level as the budget increases in various categories, so the percentages are not changing. They're
Correct.
maintaining, and
That's
that's
correct. They've
the
remained
key.
pretty steady over the last 10
Yeah,
years.
that's the key.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay, so the next slide would be what's already included. WIC, peer counselor, that's fully grant funded, but we just pointed out because it will be in addition to the FTE total count. And then we're including for police year 3 of the body camera contract, which is just over $70,000, and that will be included in the original budget. So here's the total revenue and total expenditure comparison for the general fund. You'll see that bottom line there, marginal revenue is just over $1.8 million. And here's the street infrastructure fund, Mayor, that you asked about earlier, showing that the revenue and expenditure budget for next year are $443,000, which is an increase of $41,000. We have expect by this fiscal year end to have built up to about $740,000, and so that will be added on top of it. To date, they haven't spent very much out of that fund, so that is continuing to build up.
Well, and that's the key. That was the intent, to have it in case we have any projects or something happens, that there's some money there that we can tap into.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
it's functioning like we wanted it to. Okay.
Okay, and here's where we get to department requests or considerations for council. The police department has requested a new taser system. I won't speak to that. I will let them speak about how that works and what that is if you have questions about it. Do we want to move on to the next slide?
No, I'm sure people have questions about that.
Oh, okay.
It says police department requests tasers, but what's the dollar amount? What are we talking about? How many?
I think the first, so it's a 5-year proposal, and the first year is about in the $450,000 range, and years 2 through 5, I think we're like $778,000 per year.
And for how many, and what do we have now?
I need one of the chiefs to come talk about that.
That was $778,000 a year.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up the actual proposal. Let me get you the correct numbers here.
Okay, so we currently have tasers, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, we do. Tracy Fincher, SAPD. What this is we currently have a 5-year contract with the Axon body camera taser program. What this is an upgrade of the tasers we have and a continuation of the 5-year contract for another 5 years is what we're talking about.
So it's no more tasers, same amount of tasers as you currently have?
It may be a few more for growth that we added in there. Basically, we have 3 different types of tasers that we're maintaining. Some of them are running out of warranty, out of service. This is a new, the latest taser that's came out. It's a 10-shot taser. And we want to replace all of the older ones with the new taser system.
Chief Fincher.
Please go ahead. Somebody has a question.
Chief Fincher, do the tasers tie in with the body cameras?
They will activate
Okay.
body camera. There's several things that will activate a camera, but the taser will. There's also a program I would like to eventually get that when you unholster your firearm, it activates it also, but that's down the road.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
So the request, that dollar amount, if you'll repeat it, Tina?
So in the first year, the fee is $416,000, but there's an offset of $178,000 that first year. And I don't know, they giving us credit for something? I'm not sure.
I believe they're taking the old tasers back. I'm not positive, though. I don't have that.
That might be what that is. And then years
No, there's
2,
178,000.
so 416 minus 178. Michael, can you do math that fast?
It's 238,000 difference.
Okay. So that's the first year, and then years 2 through 5, I was correct, are at $778,000. The total price tag over the 5-year period is $3,350,715.
Repeat that number.
$3,350,715.
Well, that's a hefty number.
Just to clarify, that's for the entire Axon system. That's body cameras, in-car cameras, video evidence, all of our storage for body camera videos, pictures, everything we do is captured in this system. And that's not just tasers, it's all of the Axon system.
So what's currently in your budget to pay for this stuff? Is there anything in your budget?
I don't know. I don't do budget.
No, there's nothing currently in the budget.
So this would be 3.5 million over a 5-year period. So 700,000 annually, basically.
Starting in FY '25, yes.
Yes, please,
How many
Lucy.
tasers are we talking about?
I believe it's around 100.
It's 100 tasers or 100 systems?
It
Individual body systems.
This is a taser upgrade added to a 5-year existing contract and another 5-year contract for everything. It's a complete system, body camera, in-car camera, evidence storage, the whole 9 yards. It's not just a taser system.
And I'm sorry, I looked at this and just thought tasers, and in my prep, I thought it was just tasers. So I want to ask that one, how often do we tase somebody?
It's gone way down. I could pull that data. I don't have it in my back pocket. 20 times a year.
Month?
Yeah, roughly. Okay. They have a variety of use of force options, and that's up there a little bit on the force, but it does prevent officer injury as well as suspect injury.
So are we coming to the end of an existing contract?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And when does that contract end?
25.
So we still are covered in 23, 24 budget
That's
year.
correct.
So we don't have to do anything for this year, but we would have to in the 24, 25 budget next year. So this
Correct.
is a heads up, beware that this is coming forward.
Well, I think the impact would be that 238,000 that you calculated for the current fiscal year.
Well, it wouldn't if one was 178,000 to
you're-
replace the 416, it wouldn't be.
I think they're terminating the existing agreement early and moving into this new agreement, is my understanding.
That's correct. It would end 1 year early and start a new 5-year. It's not required. We were trying to do that in order to get on with the new tasers and the new in-car video cameras.
Which is, okay, but it's still 3.5 million. So it would start in this year. So the 238,000 would start in the 23-24 budget year, and you'd move into 700,000 in the 24-25 budget. So what you're asking for right now is 238,000 if we agree to end this contract early in this year's budget. Or we could leave the existing contract as it is and budget the 238,000 in 24, 25.
Yes.
Those are your
I guess so.
options.
He said it's not required, but yes, those are the options.
So question, Chief Fincher, is, the systems are tied together, the camera in the vehicle computer system and the taser. So is that an upgrade to your computer system as well, or is this?
No.
Okay.
We have actually applied for a federal grant that would upgrade those.
Okay.
Yes, Lucy.
So is this the same company that we're going to renew the contract if we were to go ahead and approve it? Are we doing this with a different company or are we staying with the same company?
It's the same company.
Okay, so really, if we waited till 24, 25, it would be, the same company's going to be giving us the same service as they are today.
That's correct.
So right now, we can leave it as it is. Let's continue to move through the additional slides, and then we can come back and, I guess, decide totally what we want to do when we hear everything. Yes, Tom?
So, do we lose the opportunity if we don't do it this year on the 238?
No, sir, we won't lose it.
Can you make it a 7-year contract instead of a 5? I mean, 778 every year is a pretty big bite.
It is.
Would they talk about, I mean, we've talked about this in many categories. If you spread that out, it's not near the beat on the fund.
We would have to get with the company and
Right.
see if they're willing to spread it further. I think 5 is about the max they go. I could be wrong on that.
Any other questions or comments?
Just real quick, Mayor, on the life of the tasers, Chief, I mean, how long do they last?
That's a good question. I think they're under warranty for 3 years. I'm not a taser instructor. We have some that are 10 years old that are just at the end of their life cycle. We can, each year what we've done, and we've bought new tasers every year, and that's been a part of this contract, is buying new tasers to the tune of 30,000 or so each year, because we have to get new ones each year.
Further questions? Okay, thank you. Next.
Next up, the fire department requests. They're requesting continuation of the peak hours ambulance, which we are, again, recommending one-time funding source of the charity care money that they receive. And then the annual fire truck replacement contribution, also recommending getting some one-time funding for them for this year, and then looking at increasing that annual allotment in next fiscal year.
I thought we always had in the budget a dollar amount, like $250,000 for fire truck replacement.
Yes, ma'am, and we still do. I guess
So-
Chief Brody is saying, of course, that is not going as far as it used to in replacing fire trucks.
But we do have it.
We still do, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the question
The
is,
additional on top of that.
what is the additional request? Because we do have $250,000 in the budget for a fire truck replacement.
Good morning, Council, Mayor.
Good morning.
Y'all have heard me come up here and talk about this before. We cash flow our fire trucks, and we've done that for a little over 15 years. And that dollar amount, that allocation, has not been adjusted since the inception of that program. So 15 years ago, a fire truck cost about $250,000. So the schedule was buy truck, take a year off. And that by taking that year off, you accounted for vehicles that had a higher cost value other than that $250,000. Example, rescue truck and a ladder truck, very expensive apparatus. So that schedule was working great until inflation has been beating us up, especially over the last year. Brought to council a couple months ago the purchase of a new engine, $815,000. And number one, I was sticker shocked when I got that price, but with the current allocation of $250,000 a year, it's going to take 3.5 years to purchase one vehicle. We have 10 fire trucks in our fleet, and just basic math, 3 years, 10 trucks, 30 years to replace a vehicle. 30 years, a fire truck's going to be 30 years old before it is set to be replaced. We have 2 trucks coming up that are scheduled for replacement, the National Fire Protection Agency and FPA. So they recommend 10 years on a fire truck and 15 years on a ladder truck. We've pushed that out, We've pushed that out because of our maintenance program and our decrease of our lower call volume. We've pushed that out as far as we can, 15 years on an engine and 20 years on a ladder. So we have 2 trucks coming up for replacement. Rescue truck, which it is 13 years old as of today, and in 2025, it'll be 15 years old. And that truck's about $1.3 million. Ladder 1, which is a 2010, is also 13 years old. It is set at a 20-year replacement, so in 2031 or 2030, that truck will be set to renew, and it'll be close to $2 million. Dollar amount right now to replace that truck's about 1.6 million. So escalation in the next 5 to 7 years is going to push Ladder 1's price over $2 million. So backing out from those dates, By 2025, I'm going to need at least 1.3 to 1.5 million to replace Rescue 1. In 2030, I'm going to need about $2 million to replace engine, or Ladder 1. And at $250,000, we won't make it. So my recommendation is to raise the capital allocation to $300,000 a year. By $300,000, raise it $300,000, a total of $550,000. In 3 years, we'll have 1.5 for Rescue 1. It'll be slightly behind schedule, and then by the time we get to 2030, we should be very close to having the funding for Ladder 1. Sir? Correct, depending upon inflation. There's been some big contributing factors to the rise of the cost of fire trucks. Number one, this happened probably about probably longer than that, about 7 to 8 years ago, EPA regulations. Okay, everybody knows that a diesel engine now has to have DEF in it, diesel exhaust fluid. Every fire truck, every ambulance, every vehicle.
Just to be legal.
Just to be legal, correct. So all of these EPA requirements, it did nothing, but it added about $100,000 to $150,000 to the cost of a fire truck. Well, this last year, not only did we get beat up by inflation, we also had another contributing factor, accident avoidance, safety features built into every single fire truck. If you go out and buy a new Ford pickup today, it's got crash avoidance, it has backup cameras, it has steering guidance. Well, all of those safety features have been added to a fire truck too. A lot of electronics and
Very
a lot
often they're just more distracting than they are
so
beneficial.
it is. So
thing comes on and you're like,
well, you're right. Some of those safety features are distracting, but all that is done is continue to raise the price of a fire truck.
so what do you have accumulated right now in terms of dollars?
Because we purchased just a few months ago, we just finished purchasing another vehicle. We have about, if I guess, about $13,000 sitting in that account.
You've cleaned it out.
Yes, ma'am. And it was scraping nickels together to pay for this new engine. And then it's the engine that we just replaced is 17 years old. It's behind schedule. But we're trying our very best to keep our fleet as new as possible. As your fleet ages, so does your cost to maintain that fleet.
Something we've discussed, Mayor, is with some of these bigger ticket capital public safety items is implementing what the city used to have as a rolling debt plan. And so moving those expenses off of the M&O rate and into the INS rate. And so that's something we could certainly bring back, towards the beginning of the fiscal year and see if council would want to consider something like that as well to help cover when we're having our hands tied on the M&O side by the state to help cover those expenses that we still need to provide for public safety.
It sounds like a good game plan. I think I'm a little ignorant about exactly how that works in terms of moving it from one place to the next and creating funds to pay for these, which sounds like a great plan. I just think we need it better explained in statistics to show how that works.
Yes, and as I said, we've had that plan in place before here at the city, and so we could have Vince come in and kind of explain to the city council how it works and what it does to our debt capacity and what it does to our INS rate as well.
Does that apply also to the police ask as well?
Yes.
Okay, so it'd be something we could look at for addressing the police and the fire's requests.
Yes, ma'am. And so if we want to do that, I would recommend giving some one-time money for the fire truck for this year and then looking into that for the next fiscal year.
So all right, so that would mean asking for $250,000 more added to the budget than.
Added to a one-time source such as marginal sales tax or other marginal revenue.
Right, I just want to keep in mind, we have a lot of things that everybody's using marginal sales tax and funds for. So we have grant requests out there that are going to require $4 million if, in fact, we get the grant. And that's just one grant alone that will require that.
Yes.
And then we have the big grant that Shane has applied for. There will be a match request on that as well. So I get it, but I also understand the things we've already applied for, that we're going to be obligated, if we get them, to these funds.
So if council is amendable to the rolling debt plan when we bring it back, there's no reason we couldn't do it sooner rather than later and just wait until then to allocate that money to the fire department and to the police department.
So doing nothing now.
Yes, if you're open to that and having that discussion and seeing how it would work.
Does council like that? Do you understand it?
It doesn't change our interest income off this, does it? Like,
interest income?
Yeah, so like if we bank the money, which we've got in a fund, and we're earning interest on that, it doesn't change it by moving it back and forth, correct?
No, if anything, it brings more cash into our combined funds and earns a little bit more interest, depending on cash flows.
I think it sounds like a plan. I don't understand it totally, so I need to see it on paper to better understand it. But obviously, it provides the financing and the funds for the requests.
Okay, yeah, we'll
So-
get together with Vince and bring something back pretty quick.
Talk further, but yes. Okay. Thank you.
Other considerations or requests have to do with the ADA program. So Teresa, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to talk a little bit about the coordinator, since you are the coordinator currently? And
Well, I just want to compliment Teresa, number one, on the work that she's done on ADA so far. She has quickly jumped into this challenge and this ADA issue, and I am very pleased with the work that's done, how much you've gotten done in a short window of time, and how much time and energy you have spent on understanding the complexity and the needs attached to that. So I want to thank you for that, because it's a lot on top of what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I am very proud that I got my coordinator certificate in 3 months when they give you 3 years. So I do want to brag on that a little bit.
You should.
I have a lot of conversations with the ADA committee that you guys designated, as well as some members of the community regarding an ADA coordinator. And at this time, I'm not sure what a full-time ADA coordinator would do. Can I use more help? Absolutely. I mean, could I do more if I had a person? Absolutely. But I think at this point in time, we seem pretty stable as far as the ADA is concerned. I know that I get a lot more questions from staff. They bring a lot more things to me, which makes me know that they are more aware of what the requirements are and that they're thinking about these things, on the front end of projects as well. I had coffee with Larry and Kim Henry the other day, and Kim and I are working on doing combined training together for the business community. Brian has agreed, Kim doesn't know this yet, but Brian has agreed to do videos for that so that we can post it on Channel 7, so we can kind of get ahead of some of the issues that we don't directly have input into, but that could provide good education for other people. As far as a budgetary request, I did request a legal assistant that would focus primarily on the ADA, but then would also assist with other aspects of my office, such as public information requests that were increased. But as far as a full-time ADA coordinator, at this point in time, I'm not sure.
So you really want an additional staff member that would be a legal assistant as well as a support in the ADA category, but also support the city clerk's office relative to public information requests. Is that correct?
Well, it's some support for the city clerk's office, but really it's my office that processes all of the things that go out for an opinion from the Attorney General's office. Primarily body cam takes a lot of time to review those processes and review the video and get the video, although we're working with PD to make some of that a little bit more efficient. They have a direct line to download videos now, which was taking a lot of bandwidth from my legal assistant's computers when they were trying to do that. But primarily the ADA position that I asked for would focus on more of the clerical things related to the ADA coordinator. They would watch the complaint line and they would organize those sorts of things. We are in the process right now of securing somebody to help us with the transition plan. Once the transition plan is put in place, I think there will be a lot more day-to-day stuff that would need to be done by an ADA coordinator. So a full-time coordinator, so I would encourage everybody to consider that again next year to see where we are on that. But
So you don't need that now?
I don't think a full-time position is necessary now, no.
Good to hear. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and then the ADA curb cut program is something I think, did you already speak to that? Did I miss it?
No.
I've been talking with Shane and Daniel about an ADA curb cut program. It is one of the Department of Justice things that they ask you when they come into your city and they're doing an investigation. Do you have a curb cut program? It is in the information that people are submitting online to us, this is the number one concern, is that there aren't curb cuts at places like apartment complexes where there's a bus stop or even by our own pool. And currently, there is not any money specifically dedicated to that. Shane and I have talked about it, and he has supported the idea that we would create some sort of program for that. So when that issue came up, we could look at it. But I'll let him talk about a lot of the details if you would like.
And I've looked around just a little bit, and there are some cities that have curb cut programs where it's a partnership where the adjacent property owner pays for the materials, but the city provides the labor.
That would make sense because obviously apartment complexes are required to be ADA compliant as well, correct? Or other businesses, if you will. And so it would make sense to partner with people to make these curb cuts happen in partnership and covering some of the costs.
Yes, ma'am. And what we were looking at, kind of starting off this year, would be to designate a fund, basically, that we can put some funds in to actually start covering some material costs for the city, because, you know, we will at some point probably work with the business community and some of those as well to try to partner as best we can. Right now, though, I mean, we're kind of, it's one of those as we're transitioning into a program. I think having some dedicated funds, and we were looking at maybe $200,000 to start for materials, but creating its own fund. So if we don't use those funds, if all those requests don't come in, we don't utilize all those funds, they're carried over into that same fund year after year, so that one, they're dedicated to that program and for that program. And so that's kind of what we were looking at from there, not actually, and trying to absorb it this first year or two in with our existing staff and not create basically another burden for the city with more staff. But that's kind of where we were starting and kind of what we were looking at to kind of get a program started. And so that was our recommendation as we were moving forward into this year.
And really, 200,000 is just an arbitrary number. Shane really doesn't have a good grasp of what that really looks like at this point. So.
Until we start getting all the requests in and we start formalizing this more and more, we don't necessarily know how much product it's going to take or how much time or labor it's going to take to actually get around to all of the requests that we believe that we may get. We are starting to see with more here of recent with I guess the more media attention or the more attention that's been focused on that, we are starting to get more requests out there. We are starting to see, especially around the bus stops in those areas like that, where we are seeing problems. We've got one on Beauregard right now that just came in the other day. And so working with that, and we're also working with CVTD to try to address some of those issues and maybe even change some of the placement of the bus stops to make it more I don't even know if that accommodating, yes. Accommodating for those needs. We have a couple of areas over there, close to the village shopping centers, where this one area came in, and where the bus stop is on a very narrow little island, and so it's not accommodating for accessibility. And so, again, working with CVTD and also with the neighboring property owners to try to create something that is more accommodating and get these curb ramps in place if they're necessary. If not, then look at other accommodations as well.
Well, I think certainly on property that the city owns and facilities that we own, we bear that cost, et cetera. The question mark is, for example, if you're talking about apartment complex, as we're trying to address ADA issues, I would assume that those apartment complexes too legally have to be addressing the ADA issues, which isn't on our back, but it's on their back.
Correct, on their property as well. But as they are trying to connect their properties, and this one, not sure, I guess it was a complaint and or an ask to help accommodate, was from the apartment complex over there in that area, as they are redoing their sidewalks in their area around their buildings to be more accommodating. Then, you know, they had asked the city, because of how it's set up, the actual bus stop is across the street.
Yeah.
And so they were asking if we could come in and help put in the curb cuts.
Sure.
They're on the street to get to the ramp. However, that even at that didn't really make sense with how it was constructed originally, and so we're working with them to try to move it back on adjacent to their property as well, and work through issues like that. But again, I think that's one of those where we may have to come in there, and whether we do a curb cut now and place a ramp, or we look at how we actually have the actual bus stop set up. Those are improvements that we need to make within our right-of-way to help accommodate those. And again, that's what it was basically an arbitrary number that we threw out for material because we don't know how many requests, we don't know what those requests are. And again, just trying to start a program. And again, that's why we wanted to, or my suggestion was to create its own fund. That way those dollars would automatically roll over every year. And so they would be used strictly for that program.
Well, I want to make sure at the MPO, because we keep talking about adding more bus stop shelters, et cetera, that we do a better job, if you will, working, or that the Council Valley Transit really looks at the ADA issues as we select locations for that, so we don't end up with this oddity that is obviously not correct.
Yes, ma'am. And it's one of those that bus stop's probably been there for 50 years, and so that's just where it's been. And so, but it's just logistics in moving that from this block over to this next block, and things like that are be more accommodating for especially folks with disabilities.
I would like to add one more thing, that I think we're doing a better job of indicating in projects when there are funds that are being allocated to upgrades that do affect the accessibility of projects. I know there was one recently that you approved that they completely separated out those components, and all of the new streets projects we have, if I don't see it, I always ask, what part of this is ADA compliance? Are we doing sidewalks? Are we doing curb cuts? Whatever. But then also, I've had a number of comments from the community that they would like to offer suggestions, but they don't really like it being termed as a grievance. So on our website, we now have a new form that Brian created that allows people just to give us suggestions, basically. So if you don't want to file a formal grievance with the city, because that is confrontational, then there is an opportunity for people to go to the cosatx.us/ADA, and there is a box where you can just give us a suggestion.
Okay. Questions? Yes, Tom?
I agree with you on everything. The curb cuts, fine, but, and setting the money, putting a place marker that we will and will not spend. But I don't want the taxpayers to bear the burden of commercial real estate's things they need to do. I don't want to share that at all, Shane. I mean, if I don't want anybody to look at this and go, oh, well, I'll get the city to pay for that. On commercial adjustments and cuts, that's their own burden. That shouldn't be bared by all the citizens of San Angelo.
Correct, and this would just be specific areas within our right-of-way that we would look at and be working with either a commercial property and or even a private property owner if it's not a commercial business to work with them, again, only in the right-of-way. We would definitely not ever touch personal or private property.
Okay, thank you. All right, next page.
Just a reminder here that the budget and property tax levy ordinances will be introduced on September 7th and final adoption on September 19th. And the final slide for this part of the presentation is, of course, marginal revenue, coming in at just over $1.8 million. Staff is proposing a 3.5% across the board salary increase for our employees.
Where, and maybe I see it in a minute here, but where do we discuss health insurance?
We usually discuss it on this slide, but I'll let Brian speak to that.
So as part of the budgeting process, when we entered our budget, we entered where we thought we were going to be, and we've had some good years, and so there's actually no request for additional funding at this time, but I will say what I said last year, and I know you are not asking for guarantees, but past performance doesn't guarantee that next year is going to be, a good year or whatever. So there might eventually be a time where I'm going to come to y'all mid-year and say the fund is struggling, but at this time we're not asking for any additional.
Okay, so in my opinion, the 3.5% increase across the board is really good, and I would support it. And I think it's kind of cut and dry. I think it's good. Questions, comments? Thank you very much.
I do have a question. I think we would all have a preference to do more, but that we're doing what we can within the means that we have. My question would be, Brian, are there any soft dollar or lower cost benefits that we could consider that we're not seeing here that you have thought about we might offer?
Yes, sir. Actually,
Sounds like a loaded question,
Well,
like there's been this conversation beforehand.
It is loaded because I asked the question last year. It is a loaded. I told Brian I was going to ask him again this year, so it is a loaded question.
It is, and so I appreciate the sentiment. I think, as people who sign up for public service, we understand that we've got to live within the means of the city, and so I think we all understand. We're grateful for what you're proposing here. I would, from my position, acknowledge that we look at Willis Towers Watson looks at this information about raises over time, and so does World at Work reporting. And for the state of Texas, I'm sorry?
Who are they that you're talking about?
They're a group that is used by public sector personnel consultants. I met with Matthew Weatherly because, again, we don't necessarily want to spend money on consultants, but when I have access to one, I'm going to try to pump him for information. So when we were at the TMHRA convention, I grabbed him and kind of stole some of his time and asked him about some of these questions that might come up. That was back earlier in the summer. At that time, Willis Towers Watson and World at Work Reporting, which are the two groups that monitor wage increases over, state by state, at least the state level, they were saying at that time that we're probably looking at about a 5% increase across the state this year, and they said that would likely increase as it gets closer to October. That's normally the way that works. So I appreciate the sentiment. I think we acknowledge that we're probably not going to move the way some other positions are going to move this year. But we are grateful for 3.5% because I think when we first heard about the snafu with the Tom Green County Appraisal District, that a lot of us weren't anticipating anything. So 3.5% is a whole lot better than nothing. With that being said, I do think there are some low-cost benefits that you did ask last year, and we had kind of done some research on what other cities are providing. One of the things that I would put forward is to align our city holidays with the Tom Green County holidays. I think that makes sense from a messaging standpoint. I think it's a win-win. A lot of times they don't really understand the difference between what the county provides and what the city provides. And so they might go to county vital statistics to get their birth certificate. The county might be closed. Then they come to city clerk's office. I know because I used to be there. That is the second place they go. And then they get upset with us because we're open, but we can't provide it to them. And so I think from a messaging standpoint, there's a win-win there.
What does that mean?
Just that we're closed at the same time that the county is, so they don't go from building to building trying to figure out.
And I get that, and
sorry.
I think it's well said, so I understand that. My question is, what is the difference in terms of holidays in total if you align with the county? Are we giving our city employees 2 more days off, or the county gives, what are you saying?
The county provides for 13 holidays every year. The holidays that they acknowledge that we don't are President's Day and Columbus Day, aka Indigenous Peoples Day. I think there's some struggle there over how that holiday should be named. They call it Columbus Day. We might name it as Indigenous Peoples Day, but basically it's those 2 holidays per year. And that would be more in line, again, when we did a benefit survey, what we found, I believe it was 13.3. It was the average of municipalities throughout Texas.
What do we give currently?
11. So moving to 13, it wouldn't lead the pack, but it would be competitive. It would be a good benefit, I think, to add, especially in a year where, you know, we're very limited on raises. I think that would be a great thing, and if y'all are supportive of that, I could get a resolution on the next council meeting to adopt that. And then we would just align with the county. Our messaging would be simple I know it would help Brian Groves on questions that he gets as well. So, and city clerk's office for sure.
I would suggest we do that to the council. I would suggest we add those 2 holidays.
Are there more issues?
The second thing that I would recommend, based again on the benefit survey that we did, currently we increase your vacation accruals only once. It's at 5 years. A lot of municipalities move more than that, like at 10 years and at 15 years they'll change. I wouldn't necessarily want to make it too complicated, just, you know, maybe one more increase at 10 years.
So describe how that works. So currently, if you're with us 10 years, you get, or if you're with us 5 years, you get what?
At 5 years, you get 3 weeks of vacation per year. If we were to adopt a full week, then at 10 years, you'd get 4 weeks. And again, that would kind of cement, again, it's more of a retention tool, I think, because you've built that up. You don't want to leave 4 weeks a year. I think
Currently, we have, whether you're 5 years or 10 years, it's just 3 weeks.
it's 3 weeks, yes. And the average that we saw, that city, again, we're not asking for something that's going to lead the pack. The average we saw was closer to 20 days per year overall, so we're not asking
20
for
days for what amount of service?
I'm sorry, 23 days per year.
23 days for what level of service?
At the end of the accruals, like
So if you're 20 years plus, or is it 15 years plus?
yeah, it's usually 15 that next one, and it's usually only 3. It averages out to about 3 days. It's different throughout on that last jump. I'm not sure why. I mean, I think 5 weeks is a lot, so I don't think anybody wants to get to 5 weeks. So there's another jump that goes beyond
Looking
that.
behind you when you say that.
I'm sorry. Well, okay. Maybe some people want to get to 5 weeks. I'm not asking to lead the pack, but I think if we could move up our accrual at 10 years to 1 more week, that would be just a tool in our pocket for retention.
You know, I'm gonna say out loud how ignorant I am. I didn't know we had that little vacation. That to me, candidly, is somewhat embarrassing for our employees. My familiarity in business, I realize we're not talking private business, but my familiarity with vacation is you get 2 weeks, and then at 5 years you get 3, at 10 years you get 4, at 15 you get 5, at 20 you get 6. Now that in private business is not uncommon at all in the companies that I've worked for. So I'm going to say I would, whatever the council would go along with, I'll go along with moving up to whatever. That to me is rather appalling.
What I would say is I'm a pretty practical in my approach. So what I would say is, like, if you look at SHRM or HRCI or a lot of other publications that kind of watch these sort of things, like how does vacation how does the increase in vacation relate to productivity and to, for us, health claims? Because, I mean, other people, obviously, they have to go to renewals, but we're self-insured, so it impacts us, you know, front line. And
Well,
so
I think my question there, Brian, sorry to cut you off, is so, because this also plays into it. So you're going 5 years, 3 weeks, but you also get, in addition to those 3 weeks, 13 days, which is another 2 weeks. So legitimately, if you take the holidays plus it's 5 weeks you're getting as a 5-year employee. And I know from my experience in private business, that would never happen. You would be 3 weeks up to 10 years and maybe 3 days of, because the other thing you're not talking about is, and you probably are going to get there, but is how many days do we give for sick pay?
Our sick pay never changes from the get-go, but it starts
what
at,
is it?
it starts at 3 weeks per year.
So you can also get 3 weeks a year for sick pay.
Yeah, I mean, we don't use that as a PTO, though. I mean, that is, most everyone is kind of banking that, just hoping that something tragic doesn't happen down the road.
You carry that from year to year?
You carry it from year to year just in case something happens, because I would say most of us don't use anywhere close to, I mean, we probably use less than a third of that on average per year.
You have personal days on top of that?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Those are unpaid, right? I mean.
I'm sorry?
Sick time.
No, it's paid.
It's paid.
It's paid.
It's paid, so and so is your holidays, so you're really getting 5 weeks paid vacation, if you will, for up to 5 years. Year
Well-
1 to year 5, or not till year 5 does it start?
I'm sorry, year 5 is when it increases to the 3 weeks.
So the very day you're employed, year
You start
1, you get
earning-
3 weeks.
No, you start earning it, oh, are you talking about sick or vacation, sorry?
No, vacation.
Vacation. When you start earning vacation at 2 weeks per year. That doesn't mean you're given 2 weeks to start off with. So at the end of that first year, you will have earned your first 2 weeks. So you could take that as soon as you, get through the probationary period at 6 months, you would have 1 week that you could use. But it takes the full year, that full first year, before you would have earned the 2 weeks. What I would say is, again, to just make sure that we're comparing apples to apples, other cities, municipalities like us, they do average about 13.3 holidays. The sick time is pretty standard across the board. It's, and then that vacation accrual, we're good all the way up to that 5-year, even maybe up to 10-year. But at 10 years, people start to leave us behind. To compare apples to apples, it's kind of a two-pronged approach. But, whatever the council decides.
Because really what you're looking at then, by the time you get to year 15, you're looking at 7 weeks a year with your holidays, right? So I might have my note. Maybe I can't read my notes, but.
With holidays, so being 13 days, you would have those plus 20 days, so you'd have 33. At 10 years, you would have 33 days off per year. But again, that's we would not be leading the pack at that. We would be somewhere around competitive.
It's my view that an employee earns their vacation. When they come to work, they earn their vacation. So,
and what I was getting to a second ago, I appreciate that. The studies show that the more vacation time tends to positively impact the organization, from productivity, from retention, from health claims. Vacation is an important part of maintaining your health. And so what we probably will see, what I would probably anticipate, is we'll have less unscheduled sick time, which is very difficult to account for, and more scheduled vacation time, which is easier to plan for. If you know somebody's going to be out for a day or for a week, you can kind of plan to how you're going to manage that week within your given staff.
Yes, Tom, and then Lucy, or Lucy, then Tom, I don't care.
Ladies first. Go ahead.
Lucy, you're on.
I just have a question. On your sick leave or vacation, if you were to leave the city, does that roll over? Do you cash that in? Or how does that work? Or do you just lose it?
There's a certain amount that you would be eligible for, but you would lose any additional. Most of the time, people lose quite a bit of sick time.
But not vacation time.
No, they'll get paid out again.
That was my
Yeah.
question.
Up to
Up
the
to a
limit.
certain
yeah.
limit, or certain days.
And they have to be here 3 years before they get that paid out.
And my other question is, do you carry over your vacation time? Say you don't take your 2 weeks or however many weeks you have. Say you just didn't go on vacation 1 year. Does that carry on to the other year, to the next year?
Yes, it would carry on. We do have a limit at 240 as to the most that you can carry on from year to year. So after that, again, and a lot of people over time have lost a lot of vacation period time over 240. So not everybody's going to use the vacation time, but it is a good benefit to have, and we would want to encourage people to use it because, again, it does kind of help manage that. Not just mental health, but really physical health. You see a lot of heart studies that vacation really does impact that. So. And that's one of our biggest areas of claims is that hypertension and heart-related claims.
I have another quick question is, do you, say for instance, on your vacation time, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead, Tom. Let me
You
think
build
about
that back
this.
in, I'm going to throw
I'll
up
kick
with.
it. I'll tag
throw
you
this-
back in.
I have the discussion of moving from 11 to 13. I have no issues with that, just sharing that with council. Is there an expense to that?
It is a manageable expense, but yes, there will be a low cost. For example, like the airport, you're open 365 days a year. So there's going to be some additional holiday pay on those days, on those 2 days.
Right.
But it's very minimal.
marginal.
It's a small amount, but
Well,
there is a little cost.
But I'm going to side with Brenda, and we need to look at the long-term effects of, going to, once you exceed three's the standard. I mean, I've hired 5 people this year, and you can't bring them on board unless you get at 3, which is what we do here. Getting out to 5, 6, 7 weeks of vacation.
Oh, no, I'm not asking for that.
I get
Yeah.
that, but I'm just saying before those things go with those long-term employees, I realize you earn that, but I think there's periods of time and with carryover. We give you vacation to take it under a certain time of the year. I didn't know we had a limit. I'm glad we do. I have a limit on how many I can carry over, but back to the point, I don't want to see a decision made on the long term
Either. I think
made today. I have no problem on the
11 to
two
13.
going at 13, but
Right, and I can get together a presentation maybe for mid-year or something if when y'all ask for it to be brought back, or if
We're in preparation for next year's budget, but
preparation for next
I
year's
think
budget.
going from 11 to 13
is good for
is
this year.
good, but I think we need far more conversation on vacation.
I think that's good. So I'll plan on bringing that forward to y'all next budget cycle then.
Lucy?
Came
She
back
thought
to
of
me.
it.
I thought about it and I wrote it down. Okay, so let's say you take vacation. Do you have to take vacation all consecutive 1 week at a time, or do you take days off whenever you want?
I would say the vast majority do take the majority of their time that in full weeks. I think
Except around holidays.
Around holidays,
They
you
do-
do try to use, what's
Your
nice
vacation
nice
plus your
on Thanksgiving week to spend 3 days and
Your
get
holidays
a full
along with your
week off.
vacation time.
So, I mean, there's all kinds of things like that. There are people that would take advantage of, if July 4th was a Wednesday, like it was this year, which was weird. You saw a lot of people maybe take the first 2 days or the last 2 days off of that week, or maybe even the full week off. So,
But you're open to use
we're,
as you
we're,
want.
we're very open.
That's great.
That's always up to the supervisor to approve vacation based on the needs of the organization.
Yeah, because they have to cover the office.
Right,
So they
right.
have to make sure their staff's there, but, yes, Larry?
I'm unfamiliar with what your maternity leave policy is, too. I wondered if you could explain that.
Larry, I couldn't hear that. Would you just speak a little louder,
I wanted
please?
to find out what the maternity leave policy is for the city. Is it, does the sick leave essentially work as an umbrella over that, or is there a separate?
We consider
We
that.
women should have asked that question.
We consider that as part of the FMLA. That's covered under the FMLA. So they are qualified for leave under that, and so
Both,
they would
men
have
and women?
access. I'm sorry?
Both men and women?
Yes. And they would be, it'd be accessible to use their vacation or their sick time.
One final question. Do you have a policy of transferring sick leave days from one employee to another?
Yeah, in extreme circumstances where if somebody was hit with something tragic, occasionally that occurs, we'll send out an email citywide and allow people to donate. We don't allow huge donations at a time, so if it's extenuating, you might see that same person ask for, a couple of times. But we want to make sure that we're not just, banking a bunch of sick time somewhere. So we try to just manage through those processes or through those times with those processes.
Thank you very much.
Further questions? Okay. Thank you, Brian.
I'll bring that resolution back to y'all next meeting.
Thank you. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes, please.
Before we move off of this slide, I'd like to just verify or achieve clarity. We are in the process, the meet and confer process. And one of the concepts we went in with was the idea that an amount of money allocated to PD could be tailored to satisfy the terms of the meet and confer agreement. Daniel, how much clarity do we need on that in this?
I might can offer something there. So obviously with the meet and confer kind of in flux at this point, we don't actually have a contract signed. If you set aside this money, if a meet and confer agreement is achieved, then this would go toward meeting that meet and confer agreement. If no agreement is ever settled on, then civil service law would essentially take effect and make sure that you have 3.5% across the board. So it will either be 3.5% across the board, or that funding that you are designating, that $552,307, would go toward their plan. I think that's probably the best way to state that.
We want to make sure that is the concept that we talked about as we went into meet and confer, that we might try to develop something along those lines. We want to make sure that clarity exists across the days.
I guess so.
Yeah, we're just giving them the 552.
Yeah, it's just the 550. It is just the 552.
You are designating that amount either toward meet and
Yes.
confer, or if civil service
my
law takes
understanding,
effect,
yes.
then it would go to 3.5% across the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're done?
Just a reminder that we do still have $5.7 million left under the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. The funds have to be encumbered by the end of 2024 and used by the end of 2026.
Thank you very much.
And I think that's all I have.
Thank you, everybody. Good job. Thank you for being well prepared. I was shocked we didn't have that big, long table in front with the black draperies on it, like in mourning. And, because normally it's that whole,
I never thought of it that way, Mayor.
yeah. Okay, meeting is adjourned unless someone's opposing that. And I think we have lunch. Lunch
We're all in
is,
favor.
Until noon, Mayor, we finished early,
well,
so we have,
so we can sit and visit.
we can.